I would first like to take the time to apologize to everyone for my absence. I've had a lot of weight on my back in recent times, but don't worry, I'll be back making plenty more videos, and this time, it's a promise. Also, as promised, a big shout out to Devi Ever for the microphone quality upgrade, links to all of her stuff down below. Also, I want to extend to you, my subscribers, another little olive branch here. If you find an article that is biased, unfair, or just generally terrible, or if you find an interesting article in a matter of gaming or technology, feel free to send it to me in an inbox message. I will check out every single one of them, and I often reply to my subscribers, so go right ahead. And of course, you'll be linked first in the description of the video if I decide to use your article to make one of the videos that I make. I call this deal the Richard Review Tech USA deal. Fair enough? Now, if there's one thing we could learn from my first video on Anita Sarkeesian, it is this: upon entering into any discussion of this sort, no matter how calm and objective and level-headed you are, people on either side will rush to strawman absolutely everything you say. Yes, everything. To people who hate feminism, I completely demolished feminism, feminist theory, and the female gender. To people who love feminism, I provided a terrible critique of their field of study. To people who hate Anita, I proved that she's essentially a con artist. To people who love Anita, I proved that I'm a quote-unquote troll and a quote-unquote sexist, not that any of them would know what that means, and so on and so forth. But let's try and gain a little perspective here. Let's remember the reason I made the video in the first place. I made my first video on feminist frequency for a very simple reason: to respond to the obtuse posturing of one Blob Chipman, insisting that a video was somehow an academic presentation, also his bizarre insinuation that absolutely everyone who responded to Anita is somehow a quote-unquote troll because he doesn't know what the word means. So the purpose of my video was not to refute any of her arguments or even to examine them in detail, but to essentially prove that her video was anything but what Movie Bob and other people was insinuating that it was. Now let's be clear about this. Sarkeesian's damage to games as we know them is gonna be pretty much negligible at best. This is not something that I really care about in the slightest. What I do care about though is her work being used in a misguided way by her supporters, particularly her supporters in the gaming media. I figured at the time it was best to give some of these sock puppets a bitch slap by shattering their delusions of academic grandeur. In essence, you could say that my first video about Sarkeesian was not about her at all, but instead about assigning Sarkeesian to the right level of credibility, somewhere between Jim Sterling and a crazy old man on a soapbox yelling obscenities at the evening sky. She has a right to say what she wants, and in my personal opinion there is much to say about how purely characters are portrayed in certain games and how poorly written characters in many mainstream games are in general. There is room for discussion about how games need to progress into the future, sure. In fact, I'm keen to explore some of these things in future videos if you people want to hear it. But the issue here is that Sarkeesian is probably one of the worst people in the entire universe to ever talk about this stuff. Anyway, with all of this in mind, I sit down and watch Anita's second offering. And it is precisely at that moment that I realize I simply can't continue making videos responding to her. You see, given the hows and whys of the first video being created as I've explained above, I needed to go into the second video along the same lines. In other words, can this video be considered to have a university level of work and research put into it? Well, no. If I was grading this at university, it'd probably get it incomplete for lack of references. I know people are acting like idiots, coming up with a wide range of excuses for how and why Anita's lack of sources doesn't kill her argument, and I'll give you this point. She doesn't need to present anything more than a few examples of games if she's simply presenting her opinion or her analysis of these games, but at the end of the day, it was her particularly dense supporters who elevated the level of the debate into academic realms. So that is where I have to come in and explain to everybody how the video is not an academic presentation. Look, I'm not suggesting that there is not any evidence of sexism in gaming and that we can all go home. I'm simply stating that out of the reams and reams of good peer-reviewed studies out there, Sarkeesian chooses to present precisely zero. Nothing, nada, zippo. All that would take for me to check her claims would be sources. At least then it would step up to the point of an actual formal academic debate. But really, let's be honest here, there's never any chance of that happening here. Just endless flimsy justifications for endless flimsy arguments. Ultimately, the point that I'm trying so desperately to get to here is that making videos about Sarkeesian is really counterproductive, because giving her any more attention is, well, pointless. I've covered every possible beef that I could have with her methods and her supporters in the first 2 videos that I made. I mean, what more is there to say? In the words of Christopher Hitchens, that which can be asserted without evidence can also be dismissed without evidence. In other words, every single video from this point on would be the same thing. I'd just be dismissing her shit without evidence. And at that point, really, why bother to even try? All I need to do if it comes down to an inflated fat head of a fan of hers banging on about her academic credentials is just to point them at either of my videos and simply say, "Impress me, buddy." But I'm afraid that their chances of presenting a case that Sarkeesian's work is of academic quality is about the same as being hit by lightning on the Cinco de Mayo while wearing a clown suit and juggling pineapples. So yeah, I'm sorry to disappoint everyone, and this is something that I've really been agonizing over for the last couple of weeks, but I hope that you see my reasons for not wanting to engage Anita or her vapid fanfucks any further than I have to. If you want much better reasons than I've just presented for not giving a fuck about anything Anita says anymore, there's a link to a video down below by the Bad Cop 69 where he explains it more perfectly than I have. The video's a little rocky to begin with, but stick with him. He makes some fantastic points as the video goes on. But I hate to basically end this thing on a down note and make everyone disappointed in me, so what am I gonna do now that I really don't care about Sarkeesian anymore? Well, what I've always done up until this point: tear the quote-unquote game journalist a brand new asshole. So with the Xbox One controversy and E3 coming up, I'm sure I'll have plenty to talk about besides everyone's favourite lesbian lumberjack. So don't worry, with the 20 or so hours of video production that was going to be wasted on another Sarkeesian video, I can now make another 2 to 3 videos on far more interesting topics. The only significant obstacle to all of this is my university exams, and I probably won't be able to actually do anything for another couple of weeks now because of those, but once all of those are over, I will be back, and I'll be back with a vengeance. So, as always, I want to thank everybody for subscribing to me. This many subscribers is something that I could never even dream about when I was on my old channel. Thank you all. Keep thinking, keep fighting, and as always,
good night, and good luck.